Good evening, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. My name is David Bonilla. I'm with 4 Hour Future Florida, and we're here with a coalition of nonprofit organizations and community stakeholders who are hosting a panel on the 9th anniversary since implementation of DACA, or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Tonight, we'll hear from leaders from the Hispanic Federation and 4 Hour Future Florida, to talk about the impact this policy has had on immigrant communities and what DACA has meant for recipients and their families since its implementation 9 years ago in 2012. So I'd like to take a minute to thank our partner organization, Hispanic Federation, who helped put this event together. Yamilka from Hispanic Federation, thank you for joining. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, David. Thank you for having me.
Right. Well, really glad to join. Would you tell us a little bit about Hispanic Federation and some of the work y'all do?
Sure. So, hi, everyone. My name is Jamilka Mena. I am the Director of Immigration Initiatives at the Hispanic Federation. We are a national Latino nonprofit membership organization, and we were founded in 1990 to empower and advance the Hispanic community, support families, and strengthen Latino institutions through work in the areas of education, health, immigration, civic engagement, economic empowerment, and the environment. We have offices in Florida and New York, North Carolina, and Puerto Rico, and affiliate offices in different locations. And my role is really focused on immigration initiatives. So we do a lot of work with the DACA population. We provide scholarship opportunities to cover the fee. We work with undocumented students to provide tuition support and food assistance, mostly in New York, but we do a lot of immigration work and advocacy mostly on the federal and local and state side.
We're really glad that you got to join us today. Thank you so much. And thank you to the Hispanic Federation for joining as well. Also here with us, Juan Moore, who is the Regional Director with 4 Hour Future in South Florida. Thanks for joining. And could you tell us a little more about 4 Hour Future and the work you're doing in South Florida?
For sure. Hey, everybody. If you don't know me, hopefully we've got some people who've returned. And for all the new people, hello, my name is Juan Moore. I am the South Florida Regional Director at 4 Hour Future. Of course, 4 Hour Future, we're all about our 4 pillars, which is education, social justice, climate justice, and workers' rights. And I come into play because my community, my region, of course, has so many diverse people and people who just basically who make our community thrive. I'm Puerto Rican, Jamaican. Yo soy puertorriqueño, jamaicano. I graduated with some of the top of my classes, but as I looked around, those people were dreamers. And so it comes to mind Zainab at FIU, who's done great things in our community. My friend Joseph, who's a frontline worker, who's saving lives out there here in Florida. So we have this conversation. We just want your ears, your eyes, and your conversation, of course. And so that being said, I do want to say we are not any legal, we're not legal advisors. I'm not a lawyer. David definitely is not a lawyer. Yamilka either. And so again, this is just a conversation that we'd love to have, and it is pertinent in our community. So I'm ready. David, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm definitely ready. And definitely thanks. I know that, on top of the anniversary, 9 years of the DACA, it's also, of course, as we're looking at, the month of June, it's, Pride Month, but it's also, of course, Immigrant Heritage Month. And so This is something that really impacts, of course, the families of immigrants all across the U.S. and looking at the impact that this had, and I just kind of put it up on the slide here that this was enacted in 2012. I mean, now 9 years ago to this day, and so I did want to just sort of start with a question to Yamilka. What is DACA? How is it really defined? And I guess who does this apply to?
Sure. Thanks, David and Juan. As Juan mentioned, we are not legal representatives. So today what we want to do is really have a conversation about what DACA is, the impact that it has had, how it has changed immigration policy, and, get your comments and questions and be able to answer them as carefully as possible. But with the caveat that if there's something very specific, your best bet will always be to speak with an attorney or a legal representative at a nonprofit agency in your community. So to answer your question, David, DACA stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and it is an immigration benefit for young undocumented individuals who, if they qualify, allows them to stay in the country for 2 years subject to continuous renewal. It also allows them to apply for certain benefits like a driver's license, Social Security, and work permit, and shields them from deportation in many cases. A lot of this, again, depends on your particular case. And deferred action is really a form of discretion taken by the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services to defer removal based on certain criteria. And in this case, that is the presence of a young person who qualifies under the DACA program. And in terms of who is it for, is a young person. So when we get to the question on requirements, there are a lengthy list of requirements that has to do about when you were born, how long you've been here, and other kind of requirements that help you qualify for the program.
Sure, that was something I was wanting to ask. I mean, so this is really one of the policies that's it's applicable to generally younger people. It is because it's talking about childhood arrivals. Like, I guess, so what are there's definitely a good number of requirements, but are there any key requirements that stick out to you that are really important to mention?
Sure. I think the main one is that you must have, the person who is interested in applying must have come to the United States before they turned 16 years old. And that's the main one. And why, and I'm glad that you said generally young people, right? I have a friend who's 37 years old and is a DACA recipient because he was born on or after June 16, 1981. And then there's, there's a component on living in the United States, continuously, which is, again, you should talk to a legal representative if you want to know what that really means, but after June 15, 2007. And then there's a couple more like you're currently enrolled in school here, have not been convicted of a felony offense or significant misdemeanor. And those definitions and delineations anyone can find on the USCIS website. If you Google DACA requirements, the first thing that's going to pop up is the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services website with the facts and all that information about application. So those are the ones that really stand out.
One of the things for DACA, I think, is especially with where it was before, is that it essentially allowed people that hadn't been documented before to be able to work in the U.S. And was just wondering, like, with that being the case, I guess, what is a difference between someone with, say, a green card versus someone who's a DACA recipient?
Sure, that's a great question, and we get that a lot. I think the main difference is that DACA is not a lawful status. It is again, discretion provided by that enacted policy that prevents a person from being deported again in very specific circumstances, right? But legal lawful permanent residency, or what we most commonly know as a green card, it is a lawful status. There, you are lawfully present, you have a green card, right? Or a lawful permanent residency card that tells you did the right documents and are able to receive certain benefits. Things like being able to apply for citizenship after a certain amount of time. You can only do that when you have lawful permanent residency, being able to sponsor certain relatives, travel easily in and out of the country, spend less on college. And unlike DACA, which you need to renew every 2 years, given the current phase of the program, you need to renew your green card every 10 years. So those are some of the kind of benefits that people have once they become a lawful permanent resident. It's above all, DACA is not lawful status. It is a form of discretion to allow you to have a work permit, but legal permanent residency, or LPR for short, is a lawful status.
Right. So in other words, it's not a legal path to citizenship.
Exactly. Yeah,
So,
it's not a legal path for citizenship. You must have a certain amount of years being an LPR, lawful permanent resident, before you can apply for citizenship. Correct, Juan.
Awesome. But just like TPS, it is a necessary protection right now that can protect what we have. So moving forward in the future, those things could be discussed, but it is a necessary protection, right?
Sure. TPS and DACA are similar in that they are not lawful status in comparison to having a green card, but they do offer the ability for a work permit, which helps a lot of undocumented immigrants kind of take that one small step toward living in less fear and being able to go work, pursue education, and do certain things that a person who may be fully undocumented may not have the ability to.
Yeah, well, I wanted to really, of course, highlight the now relatively long history that DACA has had. I mean, it was implemented in 2012, had a full administration, and then another administration. It's been through two administrations, and so we've definitely seen challenges to it. What were some of the path that DACA went through the past 4 years? Is it currently in essentially full effect? What's the status that it's arrived at?
Yes, I mean, DACA has been controversial, to say the least, in terms of its I guess pathway or journey through the different administrations. In the previous administration, there was a lot of uncertainty because they wanted to strike it down. There was an executive order to strike it down. And fortunately, a lot of advocates, including the Hispanic Federation, we were fighting to ensure that the administration was not going to end the program. And after many lawsuits, finally in December 2020, so just not even a year ago, the U.S. District Court in Eastern New York upheld the program and forced the previous administration, to continue to accept renewals and take new applications, as well as applications for advanced parole, which is it's a very much longer story for those who are probably more involved in the DACA realm. Advanced parole may be a pathway, but again, speak to a lawyer if you have those questions. But currently, the Biden administration, I believe in January, did release an executive order speaking on restoring, faith in our systems, particularly in the Department of Homeland Security and USCIS. And that order is asking for the Department of Homeland Security to really focus on how to better our systems and ensure that wherever there are pathways, there can become. However, right now, DACA, what you can do as a person who may be eligible for DACA is apply newly, obviously with those requirements and providing a lot of documentation, or renew your DACA status every 2 years in the current state of the program.
A genuine question I wanted to ask too here was also like the number of DACA applicants went down significantly during the Trump years. Or at least there were people that were a little concerned about what the information would be used. Were there any sort of, or are there any sort of penalties or just kind of change in process for anyone that, is more than a 2-year wait time and they reapply after 2 years? If there's a lapse in reapplication time?
So I'm not too sure about that. I would recommend if you are if anyone who's listening is late in applying, to speak to a legal representative. I don't want to make a misjudgment. However, we do fully encourage everyone to pay attention to when their DACA status is expiring and renew as soon as possible. Recently, USCIS did release just an email kind of saying, try to renew your DACA application between 100 and at minimum 120 days. And I'm not really good at math, but I'm pretty sure that's more than 3 months. So, the sooner you submit your application, the sooner you can, be more secure in ensuring that your renewal will be processed. But I cannot speak to that question, unfortunately, David.
Cool. Yeah, but I will definitely say, David, I don't know about numbers either going down during the administration, but I will talk about numbers. And I got my source from Forward.us. When we're talking about coronavirus now, the numbers read that 200,000 DACA recipients are actually essential workers. And out of those 200,000, 30,000 are healthcare workers. So what it looks like now in the present is if we don't continue to progressively, talk about DACA, then imagine what the economy would look like, or imagine what your food service, your healthcare service, your just everyday life would look like, especially here in South Florida, especially in New York, especially in New Mexico, states that are predominantly dominated by our brown and our Black sisters and brothers.
Yeah, and Juan, you bring up a great point. I know that in the past year plus now, right? We're in the middle of the post-pandemic, not really space, but in the last year and a half, there's been a large celebration of essential workers and how much they have done. Grocery workers really cleaning our cans and floors, and essential workers who are a lot of them. There is a good chunk that have been undocumented or are DACA recipients who are nurses and things like that. Yet a lot of them have been left out of federal aid, right? No undocumented person has received stimulus aid. They were not beneficiaries of a lot of the healthcare, like the expansion of emergency TANF or other kind of food assistance programs. And a lot of states have had to take those steps on their own to ensure that undocumented people receive something, given their role, like you were saying, in the economy, and also just in keeping our cities alive. Here in New York City, we enacted more recently, and after a very long advocacy fight, the New York State Excluded Workers Fund that provides direct cash assistance to undocumented workers who fit in within a very specific criteria, yes, but it's essentially 2 tiers they created. One which will give you the same amount of funding that every one of us got in terms of stimulus money, which is $3,200, or it's like a retroactive payment for a year's worth of unemployment insurance, which, as we all know, undocumented people do not qualify for. So some states have taken it within themselves. We can talk about California and other states that have really said, you know what, like we'll try our best given our limitations, but we need to do more and continue to push and talk about DACA and the importance of documented and undocumented people in general to our economy. Will always be an important fight that we at the Hispanic Federation and I'm sure you all at For Our Future and Beyond are willing to take on.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, these matters, like we talked about it yesterday, was George Clooney, who's one of my favorite activists. But in most of these issues, to be a matter of fact, there's no right, there's no left, there's no up and down. It's right and wrong. It's human. Yeah. It's human rights that we're talking about, and we went thoroughly as much as we could of even how hard it is to get some of this acknowledgement as a recipient. So it's not just like people are sliding through a loophole. This is something that has been thought out for 9 years, and hopefully we keep it going and keep the conversation going for sure.
Yes, that's most definitely necessary for sure.
Wanted to, of course, kind of how we're directing the conversation, wanted to mention and ask, and suppose both to Juan and you, Yamilka, especially with, how many people we know are impacted in South Florida. Like, given the time frame of this, like, what did this, I guess, change for the reality of undocumented peoples, and how have you seen, or are there any like circumstances where you've seen of the impact that DACA has had for immigrants?
Yeah, I would love to speak to that. I think in terms of impact, it has positively impacted the lives of many individuals, right? A lot of people, just undocumented individuals in general, have a fear of deportation, and that prevents many of them from living and leading full lives, right? We want to make sure that through whatever forms of status and through legal services, a lot of them free through community-based organizations, that people are able to understand their rights, and we are able to mitigate that fear and ensure that people feel safe in their communities. Like Juan mentioned, it is a human right, right? The issues that we talk about that have been seen in the news, and asylum and refugee status, all of those things, and immigration is a human right. So we have seen, and I've had the pleasure of reading essays from our DACA scholarships and the Dreamer Fund that we have, and I always feel humbled to hear the stories of young people and older people talking about how they were able to get a job and support their families. They were able to go to school and pay off the last balance of their tuition and be the first to graduate high school or the first to graduate college. One of my personal friends, who I would have loved to have been here, but he's currently in class in law school, and he has kind of, his trajectory has been amazing, and he loves to share his story because it's a story of perseverance, and it motivates me to continue to do the work that I do. And the impact goes beyond just even big things like being able to become a lawyer or things like that, but small tiny things like, I can go to the store after a certain amount of in the morning, which is when ICE usually shows up, given historical data. I can go to the store in the morning without worrying that I'm never going to come back and see my kids. Those small wins have continued to motivate, myself as a person working in the immigration field, but also myself as an immigrant, as well. So, the impact can range from something tiny to something big, but it's all worth it at the end of the day.
For sure. And like I said before, it's a global issue. So like, sometimes when you think of immigration, you think of a certain group, but I mean, we're talking Europeans. I had, like I said, Zainab was from Palestine. I have my friend from Joseph, he's from Haiti. And there's countless of many other faces. So this is a global issue. And I'm sure it affects so many people, even around me. I could remember Zainab telling me, and I was just so surprised to see you're a dreamer. And she was right beside me there when she was going, I guess, to recertify. I just saw how much that impacted her. But when she got back and I saw her in class again, just a smile on her face, just to say, this is home for me. And I'm going to continue to pursue it the right way. I think it's an awesome tool. And I think it's definitely necessary within our construct, for sure.
Yeah, and I would like to add to that. I think, as a tool to mitigate the fear, but also kind of open the doors to additional possibilities, work, school, and things like that. A lot of dreamers have fully taken advantage of that and have then come back to contribute to their communities. And I think you see that full circle when you think about, what it means to provide a path towards citizenship for undocumented people. And I just want to share the Center for American Progress literally yesterday released their report saying that if they outline a couple of scenarios, but I'll just share the first one. If we were able to provide a pathway to citizenship for all, I think it's 10.2 undocumented immigrants, the U.S. domestic gross product will increase by a total of 1.7 trillion over 10 years. And we know the power of the economy and, unfortunately, dollars when it comes to spending. And we know where that fits in. We just need, to push on the advocacy side for that.
Okay. Well, we do have a couple of questions and comments in the chat here. I wanted to read one out from Stephen, which is what has been the greatest lesson regarding our DACA recipients and the rest of the 11 million essential workers? What is the greatest lesson during COVID? Whichever one wants to have a go.
Sure. Coming from a place like New York City, which is where I'm located, we saw first and foremost that without these essential workers, who a large percentage of them here were undocumented, the city wouldn't have functioned. The city would have functioned. You wouldn't have had, your food delivered, when your the laundromats open, like nothing would have functioned here in New York City. And I think the biggest learning lesson is that outside of knowing definitively, because people who work in the immigration realm already know the impact undocumented people have on the economy, on your everyday life, but having that kind of broadcast more clearly across the United States, and people really kind of applauding and recognizing the impact of undocumented immigrants, that would to me be the biggest impact. And on top of that, many states, like I was saying, including New York, have made it a point to say these essential workers are important. We need to protect them. We need to provide something so that they can continue to do the work that they do. And then federally, there is a bill that is asking to provide, I can try to remember the number, but there is a bill that is asking to provide, the American Dream and Promise Act of 2021, sponsored by Representative Roybal Allard from California. She essentially is proposing a pathway for citizenship for the millions of undocumented immigrants that are essential workers. So, it has been catching more steam, for lack of a better word. There's a lot more fight left to go. But I think the pandemic has highlighted a lot of these inequities and pushed a lot of advocates to fight harder and, inch our way closer to the Citizenship for All platform, which at least Hispanic Federation is pushing for.
Yeah, and want to highlight some more comments that were just kind of coming in as you were mentioning, like, yeah, we can't live without all of us. Nationalism isn't sustainable, which I think that, the resistance to pathways to citizenship are really just rooted in that, and definitely want to highlight that comment. Yeah, I guess one of the things, and you certainly talked into it a bit, like especially with the work Hispanic Federation is doing. What are the positive steps for immigration policy that we're still hoping to see?
So, I mean, there's various. Currently, there's a couple of bills in Congress and Senate that have been back and forth, unfortunately. But overall, the goal is citizenship for all undocumented people, a pathway to citizenship, right? We're not asking for a handout. We're asking for a pathway after the years and years of work and dedication to our communities. And there's, like I mentioned, the American Promise. I keep on forgetting the full name of it. The American Dream and Promise Act is a step toward that, because it highlights the importance of essential workers, farm workers, and DACA recipients in particular. So in terms of where do we have left to go, there's a lot of fight left in us, being able to march whenever there's a march, calling your representatives whenever there is a representative to call to push for certain policies, to be able to push in the White House, and ultimately supporting your neighbors. I think policy is only one way for us to, make a change, but being kind to your neighbors, to your essential workers, and supporting, businesses owned by undocumented people. We do know that small businesses, a lot of them are owned by undocumented people, and ultimately just understanding what immigrants have done for this country and supporting them as much as we can.
Yeah, and I just wanted to back that and just say, dreamers are the children of people who made sacrifices to come over here. And so most of, if not all of them, have something inside them innately that says, I want to be successful for abuela, for grandma, for grandfather, for my uncle. So just imagine if you don't know anybody who's in those shoes, just what it would be like to send your children off or on a journey that you might not come back from in the hopes of being successful. These are what is the dreamers are the product of that. So I just wanted to let everybody know that for sure.
And I think that, in terms of like where all sorts of different nonprofit spaces come together, really, of course, what are our calls to action? And like, we are on a community engagement side where we really, of course, encourage people to, stay engaged with their local officials, with their state officials, senators, representatives. And of course, here from the Florida program, we have two that we regularly reach out to. Senator Rick Scott and Marco Rubio, and know that and just keep track of their record on immigration, and of course continue to call them, write them, and then of course point to the legislation that we are counting on to see, especially knowing how many people across the country and in the state are impacted by immigration policy, and how many lives are changed by just an incremental positive change. And what could really be beneficial long term if we see these kind of structural changes that we hope to see from these pathways to full fledged citizenship for these millions and millions of dreamers.
Yeah, I think you talked about it in the right way, right? Ultimately, the fight that needs to happen is, I think somebody mentioned, we have a very limited time, and the time is now. The time is always now to be able to ensure that immigrants and your neighbors, your friends, your family members have a pathway towards citizenship. And, on the anniversary of DACA, which is the point of this event, it's been 9 years, right? 9 years of constant wondering of what's going to happen next. And especially in the previous administration, where there was a very big uncertainty in terms of whether this program was going to be upheld. And it's 9 years too long to wait for a pathway for people who have contributed endlessly, even more so now as essential workers during the pandemic. And, we want to make sure that our representatives, organizations, all of the United States hears us when we say that 9 years is too long and we need a pathway towards citizenship now.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dave, I saw your statement in the chat, and there is very little time when you look at all of us have the 24 hours a day. You sleep, you work, you eat, and so there is little time to enact on so many things. But what we do, and here's our call to action, is Dave, you can write letters to your editor. We train you to do that here at For Our Future. You can phone bank, you can text, you can just be here what you are, and I thank you. And spread the word, and just amplify the issue. And those are just some of the simple ways you can join our organization and help out within the community. But you are most definitely right. The time is now for people to get up, be non-complacent, and say enough is enough for sure.
Yeah, and to build upon that, Juan, I think you are right. Calling your reps, writing to them, maybe faxing them if you still have one of those. But another way that is maybe smaller is visiting your neighbors, go to the local bodega, go to the local, halal spot. More than likely, there is either an undocumented immigrant or a dreamer or somebody that in your neighborhood that you can support. And beyond that, right, there's the federal kind of calling your federal representative, your senators and your Congress members, but locally, understand what laws are impacting immigrants. There's a lot of laws here in New York State with regard to providing more access to immigration legal services, right? So that they can understand their rights and they can potentially have a pathway towards citizenship, but without needing to pay thousands and thousands of dollars or being victims of fraud. So understanding your local laws. Sometimes cities are doing much more than federal government. So, your local town, going to your community board meeting and seeing what their immigration concerns are and how you can support. I think there are many, many ways, and we can go on and on about that, but maybe even starting off with just learning a little bit more about what's going on and plugging yourself in, whether it's an easy click here to send a letter to your representative or marching in protest. There's so many ways that you can get involved and support immigrant communities in the United States.
Sure.
Absolutely. Well, definitely appreciated taking the time and, of course, getting to discuss this and, of course, recognize and highlight 9 years since this became a reality for millions of people, and of course, then of course get to talk about what we are still yet to hope for. So, really want to thank Hispanic Federation and of course you for joining in, and of course want to open any closing remarks that anyone would like to make, ways to stay engaged and move forward and work together.
Sure.
Yes.
Go ahead, Juan. I've talked a lot. No, go ahead.
By all means, please.
Thank you. No, I was just going to say, the issue, like Juan mentioned, is more than just an issue that's going on in the United States. We are all immigrants, no matter where we come from. And this is the land of immigrants. And that is sometimes something that is forgotten. It is very important to understand where we come from and to push for policies that enact our basic human rights. And if you're not able to do that for your neighbor, if you can do that, sorry, I misspoke. If you're able to do that for your neighbor, your friend, your tío, your tía, it's just a great way for you to continue to live as an American in this country. Because at the end of the day, we're all chasing the same American dream, and we want to live without fear, together, be able to contribute to our economy, have our kids live better lives and better futures. And ultimately, we can all do that if we work together to help each other.
Awesome. You said it. I was going to say the same thing. So I'll just leave it like what we usually say. So there's no way around us, only through us. And when I say us, it's me, you, and everybody watching. And so when you reach out the next time, reach out with your eyes closed and your heart open. We'll see you again.
Wow, that was beautiful.
All right. Well, thank you all, everyone. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in and for commenting and asking your questions. And of course, thank you for this and recognizing this month of immigrant heritage, and hope you enjoyed.